Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is going to be an overview of the Shri Shupanashad. We've gone through all 18 mantras and the invocation. And so we're going to do a quick overview, and then we're going to have a discussion on the things that came out of our classes, our reading of Shri Shupanashad, and just the things that we are taking away from the Isopanisad. So I'm just gonna, this is gonna be chronological. I'm just gonna try to run through this quickly. So we have the invocation. In the invocation, the main points that came out of that is that the absolute truth is complete. It's the complete whole. And the absolute truth displays completeness in different ways. So one is that the complete understanding of the absolute truth is the understanding the personal feature of the absolute, or Bhagavan, which includes Paramatma and Brahman. So there's these three features of the absolute, but Bhagavan includes all three, whereas the other ones only include either themselves or themselves and one other. So that's the complete understanding of the absolute. Also understanding that everything that comes from the absolute truth is complete also. But the completeness that the emanations have the completeness is in relation to the source or to the absolute truth. So it's not that we're all complete in the same way, but we have completeness in a particular way, and it's in relationship to the absolute. And so the point of the Shri Shupanashad is to understand what is that completeness, the completeness of ourselves in relation to the absolute, the completeness of the world in which we live and its relation to the absolute. And so when we understand how these things are actually related to the complete whole, then we feel complete. And we feel incomplete when we have a misunderstanding and misapplication of our own completeness in relation to the complete whole. So the one point that was brought out there is that for the living entity, for us, that we experience completeness when we serve the complete whole, just like the hand is satisfied when the hand serves the body by bringing food to the mouth. So then the whole body is satisfied. So by our service to the complete whole, then we feel this is our completeness. So that was the invocation. Then in mantras 1 to 3, mantras 1 to 3, they teach us how to act in that completeness. It's the science of acting properly. It's both the action. It's in these first 3 mantras, it teaches about proper action, but it also teaches about proper consciousness to do those activities with. And actually that's the more important element, is to have the proper consciousness. So one of the points that was brought out in those first 3 mantras is that human life is meant for self-realization. That's the arrangement of nature, and it's the arrangement of Krishna, the source of nature. So yes, human life's meant for self-realization. And so we're supposed to act in pursuance of that. That's called akarma. And self-realization ultimately means God consciousness, because in other places, Prabhupada describes how there's two selves. There's a self with a capital S, and there's a self with a small s. So we're the self with a small s, and Krishna is the self with a capital S. So essentially, the point of human life is to learn how to act, to do our activities for the pleasure of the Supreme, or for the satisfaction of the Supreme. So that's the perfection of activity, to act for Krishna. The mantra 3 tells us that one who doesn't utilize human life in that way, we lose the opportunity that we get in human life. So if we don't utilize human life like that, then we go back into the animal species of life. So it's just like, if you misuse, just like people get put in prison because they misuse their ability to act freely in the world, but because they misuse that, then they get that taken away from that ability to act freely in the world. So it's the same thing. So that's mantras 1 to 3. How to act properly? To act properly means to act for the pleasure of Krishna. And if we don't act properly, then that opportunity is taken away from us. So that's mantras 1 to 3. Mantras 4 to 8 then describes, so we're supposed to act for Krishna, but mantras 4 to 8, they increase our knowledge of who is Krishna and who we are and what's the relationship there. So mantras 4 and 5, they describe some of the inconceivable potency of the Lord, of Krishna, and also some of his supreme power, his opulence. There's some seemingly contradictory statements there. The Lord walks, the Lord doesn't walk, he's near, he's far away. But Srila Prabhupada in those purports, he describes how actually all of these things that seem contradictory, because the Lord has inconceivable potency, he can do all of these things. So the Lord manifests in so many ways, and he can do all of these different things simultaneously. So that's 4 and 5. Then 6 and 7, it describes the vision, the vision and the experience of a self-realized soul. Srila Prabhupada also describes different levels of devotees in the purports there. From the verses, it says that a self-realized soul has no illusion, no anxiety, and he has no hate toward anything. He sees everything. He sees everything in the world, everything material, all people, all beings. He sees them all in connection with Krishna, and he knows, he sees them in connection with Krishna, and he also knows Krishna. And that's text 8. It says there that one who's in this consciousness, this self-realized soul, certainly knows Krishna, and it describes there are different ways in which the self-realized soul knows Krishna. So that's mantras 4 to 8, increasing our knowledge of the self and of God. Then in mantras 9 to 11, it brings out the point how the goal of knowledge, the real goal of knowledge, is ultimately to know the absolute truth, to know Krishna. This is the real goal of knowledge. And Srila Prabhupada in those purports, he gives the difference between knowledge for the cultivation of knowing the absolute truth and knowledge for the purpose of increasing our level of sense gratification. And it's pointed out in those mantras that the result of cultivating knowledge of the absolute and cultivating knowledge of increasing our material comforts, the result is different of cultivating these two types of knowledge. Yes, and so to know, so that's one thing, and he brings out this point. It's one thing to know Okay, this is a little bit of a word technicalities here, but to know that Krishna is the goal of knowledge, that's one thing. To know that he's the goal, but to actually know him, to actually know Krishna is another thing. So we can know that Krishna is the goal of knowledge, and he says that in the Bhagavad Gita in a number of places, but in the 15th chapter, he says that he says there, Vedaischa sarvara hameva vedya, that he's the goal of knowledge. But to know him as a person, to know who Krishna is, that's not an intellectual exercise. Srila Prabhupada brings out the point that only by devotional service or this cultivation of a relationship with Krishna does Krishna actually reveal himself. So the goal of knowledge is Krishna, but to know Krishna, one has to perform devotional service. It's the only method of knowing God. And also Prabhupada, in one of those purports, he brings out the 18 items of knowledge, what is considered knowledge, and that's from the Bhagavad Gita also. So that's mantras 9 to 11. Then in 12 to 14, it describes how, so in 9 to 11, Krishna is the ultimate goal of knowledge. In 12 to 14, Krishna is the ultimate goal of worship. And it describes there the result of worshiping what is supreme and worshiping what's not supreme. So this point is brought out in all of these sections. If you act properly or if you act improperly, if you cultivate the right knowledge or if you cultivate the wrong knowledge, or if you cultivate or if you worship, if you have the right goal of worship or if you have the wrong goal of worship, you're either going up or you're going down. So the living entity is always doing one of two things. He's going up or he's going down. So this is one of the main themes that Isopanisad is bringing out in all these sections. So Krishna is the ultimate goal of worship. And the result of worshiping others is there's a different goal. Basically, the result of worshiping Krishna, Krishna describes in the Gita, is you go back, you get out of the material world, you get out of the cycle of birth and death. You become liberated, you go to the spiritual world. The result of worshiping others is you stay in the material world, which is Isopanisad describes it as the world of darkness and ignorance. That seems to come out quite a bit. And then mantras 14 to 18. So this is this section is the author in devotion. He's praying to the Lord. So in 14 and 15, 15 and 16, the author is praying to the Lord to remove the effulgence that's coming from his body so that he can see the personal form of the Lord. So this is mantras 15 and 16. And in these purports, Srila Prabhupada, he describes these in more detail, these three aspects of the absolute truth, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And he's describing how this personal feature of the absolute is the highest and is the source of all the other features of the absolute truth. And in text 17 and 18, the author, the devotee, he's praying for the Lord's help. And this is a point that Prabhupada brings out in these verses, that for one who is on this path of devotional service, the Lord helps him from within. This is from the Bhagavad Gita, that one who's practicing devotion and who's sincerely endeavoring on this path of bhakti, that from within the Lord gives knowledge. Krishna within the heart, he gives knowledge by which we can attain the goal of life. And so this is ultimately, it's leading to this point how the ultimate goal of life is to know God and to have a relationship with him, and not to just have it, but to actually engage in a relationship. And so this actually, Srila Prabhupada, it's interesting because the next book we'll study is the Nectar of Devotion. And it's interesting how Srila Prabhupada actually, in a few places, he inserts how in the Nectar of Devotion, it's the science of cultivating that relationship with the Supreme. So the Isopanisad, it establishes how Krishna is the goal of all activity. He's the goal of all knowledge. He's the goal of all worship. And to know Krishna, you have to perform devotional service to cultivate a relationship with him, and he reveals himself. And so Nectar of Devotion is the science of cultivating that relationship. There's just one other point that I forgot to mention, is that in terms of mantras 4 to 8, it's also in that section describing how the understanding the absolute means to understanding God. It's not just, it's Krishna and his energies. So just like you have fire, which is the source, and you have heat and light. So similarly, you have the absolute truth, which is the source of everything. And then everything else is the energies of the absolute. And so there's a oneness there's a oneness and a difference there also. Just like heat and light are, they are not separate from fire, because when there's fire there's heat and light, so it's simultaneous. But at the same time, there is a difference, because you can stand in the heat and light and not get burned, but you can't stick your hand in the fire and not get burned. So there's also some difference. So that point was also brought out in those middle verses. So Damodar, you can, if you want, you can fill in anything there. That was my overview.
This is great. It's like such a, it's like you know, those ladus, they compacted with so many. Sometimes they have like raisin ladus or nut ladus, and so many good things put together, and this is this wonderful sweet ball. So that's exactly what you've done with the Shupanashad. You've take all the bits of Shupanashad and made it into a very nice sweet sweet ball for us to accept. There's one point I really like there, and I'm trying to summarize it. Knowing that Krishna is the goal of knowledge. Okay, knowing that Krishna is the goal of knowledge is an intellectual activity. But knowing Krishna is a heartfelt activity.
Yeah. It's
I love that.
It's a relation. There's the, yeah, it is heartfelt. It's about the relationship, and relationship means that the heart is involved.
I'd like to hear from the others. Well, okay, let me just say something really quickly before we start sharing. I'll start the sharing, I guess. For me, I really like seeing the Shupanashad from the perspective of teaching it. First time I teached it, and it's a whole different relationship you have with a book when you have to teach it. Like I found, like you really have to study it, and I felt it was great. Like I felt I knew the main reason why I thought Shupanashad should be taught is because it was short, but I didn't realize it was so packed with so much knowledge, you know. And it is such a nice, compact book where everything's there. Like it's a perfect introduction because the whole philosophy is condensed there.
Yeah.
It gives really a good basis in Krishna consciousness, and it's just a perfect springboard for now getting into the nectar of devotion. Because, you know, Bhakti has been established as like the supreme path to reach the Supreme Lord. And now we're going to get into the details of Bhakti. I just found it's amazing experience. From also the perspective of teaching it, you know.
So you're starting the sharing here?
Yes. So we're expecting others to speak.
So we want to hear from you guys, things that things that impacted you from studying Isopanisad, certain points that came out, certain discussions we had, anything that kind of impacted you, that kind of like new idea or sent your life in a different direction, whatever. Any points?
That it touched your heart and made your head explode.
I think for me, I realize how much I say hate, or how many times I think I hate someone. So that was a big thing for me. It just kind of shone a light on my consciousness about how much I say this one thing and how I need to shift that. And another thing that came up for me was that to be a devotee is to be a little bit austere. I've been thinking about that a lot. Because, when you hear something that feels super right, but you also aren't quite there. So for me, it's like, I want to bring a little austerity into my life.
Did that point about hate, did that cross your mind when because in the one verse it describes how the self-realized soul, he doesn't hate anything or anyone. Is that when that crossed your mind?
Yes, like once we read that mantra, I've been thinking about it ever since, all the time.
Wow.
Because it would be such an amazing place to get there, to think like, I don't have that kind of hate, to truly see people with like neutrality and love. Like, I just think it's such a lofty and worthy goal, and I'm so far away from it.
Yeah, there's it's interesting because in the beginning of the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada, he gives and it's there in the Shupanashad also, the science or the way in which to love everybody. And he says that because it's described in that mantra, how when you see everything in connection with Krishna and you realize that how everybody is a part and parcel of Krishna, if you simply love Krishna, then automatically you'll love everything else because everything's part and parcel of him. So he said this is the formula for having this kind of love. And it's a deep thing because to not hate everything, you need to like when things happen, and if you're developing some love for Krishna, you need to see how Krishna is behind this, or Krishna is in this somehow. He's controlling this. I guess that was in the first mantra of Isopanisad, how he's the controller and the owner of everything. So it would be it sounds like you would love to have that experience.
Yeah, I've always wanted that. Even when I didn't know this path, I've always just to be in a place of connection and love always feels the best. Like even when we didn't know it was about serving Krishna, anytime anyone's in connection, and anytime you're out of that, it always feels gross. Like you can always feel it, So That's my
Nice.
goal.
And,
Nice.
and like, it makes me think there's a lot of, hate movements out there, especially we hear more and more these days about that, and how so many people live in hate, and it's so sad. But the solution, but the problem with that is because everybody has impurities in their heart. And this hate cannot go away until there's spiritual purification and spiritual education. That we have to purify our heart from these unwanted, from envy, and lust and anger. But the root cause of all of these is because we want to enjoy separate from Krishna. We want to be the enjoyer. So therefore we want to put others down so we can enjoy at other expenses. So the real solution to get rid of hate is purification of the heart. We say love, okay, love, everybody love. It's hard to love when you have impurities in the heart. And where's the process to purify the heart? And that's where Bhakti comes in. Bhakti is the process of purifying the heart. It starts first with your relationship with Krishna. Because you have a problem all other problems you'll hate. You'll hate everyone? But if you love Krishna, he's the source of everything, then you'll love everyone.
Yeah. It's I like what you said, Damodar, about the hate movements, because people have we have this tendency to love. Nobody can stop it. People love their family, or they love their dog, or they love their country, they love their city, whatever it is. Like, the soul by nature has this propensity to love. We can't stop it. It has to be put somewhere. But like these hate movements, it's like our love only extends so far based on and it's based on our who we think we are, or who we think other people are. So it's like, oh, they're not in my group, so I don't love them. It's like, I love the people in my group, but outside, I don't love. But when we, like in that mantra of Isopanisad, when we see everybody and everything connected to Krishna, that we're all in the same, we're all in the same family, then there's no more limitation to our love. It doesn't get limited by this false identity of who we think we are, who our group is, or this or that or the other thing.
Because everybody, everything is part of your group.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to comment on a devotee needs to be austere. Well, again, in the
this
next
one thing, Mike, if you want to pipe up at any point, this is what we're doing. We're just having a discussion here. You don't have to. Wait to be invited to jump in here, and don't feel like you're stepping on our toes or anything.
For sure.
We want a spontaneous discussion here. And
finish what you were saying about the austerity. It's I was actually just gonna comment after that, because naturally is something I took away from this as well. So
again, it's an advertisement. Okay. I'm advertising the Nectar of Devotion. We're pumping you up for pumping you up, is that the expression? Or pimping you for the next part of the course. Is that there's sections there of how a devotee needs to practice, and like austerities are recommended of Bhakti. What's great about Bhakti also is that the austerities are not that much, but austerities in Bhakti go a long way. If you just apply yourself in Bhakti and do the necessary things, it's not necessary. Like some in India, there's paths that are very austere, and they make very little progress. Whereas in Bhakti, even if you're a little bit austere in Bhakti, you go a long way. So, but the Nectar of Devotion will talk about there's definitely recommendations of things to follow, and just following that is like an austerity. You know, it's like there's a 4 regulative principles that go into that details of like no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex. That's just following, that's an austerity in itself. Also, like doing your sadhana every day. Sometimes your mind is not there, sometimes it's there. That's an austerity. You know, chanting a prescribed amount of japa every day. The recommended amount is 16, but I know at the beginning, you take your steps that towards that. It took me like a year or 2 to get fully to the 16 when I started practicing. Anyways, but just doing that every day is also an austere. And if you think about it,
it took me a few lifetimes.
And if you think about it, the goal is that these austerities become enjoyable, actually. It might look austere for other people, but this becomes a source of joy for devotees. You know, nice. To do this and to refrain from sinful activity.
Well, and that's kind of like what that's the part of it that's actually affected me the most, is like just the day-to-day life. Like very early on, I think it was one of the first group of the mantras, we had a discussion, and it was talking about like how to keep Krishna in our mind in our day-to-day life. And I remember sending an email about like driving, right? Specific. And it's actually hilarious because like I was on deliveries on Wednesday, and I was talking to my mom on the phone, and just out of the blue, she's like, you know what, I've really noticed a difference is like when you're driving, you're never like upset anymore. Like I never hear you saying anything to other drivers, and I kind of was just like, I didn't even realize it. Like it kind of actually took me aback. It took me, and I just went silent because I was thinking about it. And what I've noticed is that exact thing is like, I don't know if it's necessarily like specific mantras going through my mind, or just the weekly association and then reflecting on them and everything else, that it's kind of led to this Krishna just being in the back of my mind throughout day-to-day life. Like it's given a lot more meaning to, I've had a hard time my whole life with like, why do we do the things we have to do? Like all these necessities that you have to get through in day-to-day life. It's always been really tough for me. Like I wish I could have just, like I had a daughter when I was really young, right? So I've always had this dream of like kind of what you guys did, like go to India and study for a while and be able to do that. And I just never have had that opportunity. And it's like, now all of a sudden it feels like the day-to-day life is that same pilgrimage. Getting through all this is the austerities, like getting cut off in traffic and thinking, hey man, they must have be having a really bad day today, or I wonder what like has gone in this person's life. Like all of these things is like giving thanks now and has become part of the practice, right? And it's funny because like what Damodar was just saying about the sadhana, it's like some days I find I don't want to, or it's like, it's like, I don't know if I have time for this. But then all of a sudden it's like you're doing it and it's everything just goes away. Like you can't imagine doing anything else. So it's changed so many parts of my life. It's just been phenomenal. And I think it's just the Sangha, right? Of looking forward to talking with everybody and associating with other devotees, right? Like it's crazy. I can't believe the changes it's had.
Yeah. It's Srila Prabhupada gives an example when in terms of our experience of Krishna consciousness, that when you start, like when you're taking off in a plane and the plane just starts like taking, like accelerating, you really feel it. You feel something's going on. So that's what it's like at the when we take up Krishna consciousness. We get this like a lot of us, a lot of this, I know personally, I have this experience also. A lot of things, it was just like the most amazing thing.
Well, but
most
it's
amazing
also,
thing ever came across my life.
some of it's actually really uncomfortable as well. Like some of my daily routines are things that I used to do. Like I used to get off work and I would sit and watch like sports highlights, right? Like that would be my way of like turning my mind off. I wouldn't actually pay attention to anything. I never watched games, but it was just something I used to do, right? And I cannot watch it. I can't watch any like political shows anymore. Like it's just so it's so weird. So now it's like, you know, like I got home today and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna sit on the couch, and next thing I know, I'm like reading the Gita, right? Like it's just like, what am I doing? Like, what's happened to my life? Like,
you develop the taste.
Yeah.
You develop the higher taste.
Yeah, exactly.
that's it. Yeah.
And this is, just what you're saying. This is actually, personally, I didn't understand this point of Krishna consciousness like very, very well. And I feel like I've started to understand it more fully just recently. But what you're saying is really, this is really important, that we don't have to change our situation in order to have this experience of Krishna consciousness, of bliss, of happiness. We don't have to change anything about our situation. It's just, and this is the whole teaching of the whole Gita. At the beginning, Arjuna, he's in utter distress because he has to fight. And at the end of the Gita, he's in total Krishna consciousness and he fights. So his activity doesn't change, but his consciousness does. So this is really important, because there's a lot of spiritual schools out there that the tendency is that spiritual means that it's not material. So spiritual means that I have to give up. I have to change something. I have to do something different. But activity is not the problem. It's our consciousness. So when our consciousness changes, then life becomes anything. Anything can be, even the smallest little, like, you know, daily activity that we've done every day can be completely blissful, if our consciousness is in the right place. So I really like that you brought that up, because it's a really important point, because there's a lot of devotees that when they took up Krishna consciousness, that they felt like, I have to change my situation. I have to give up my family, or I have to do this, or I have to do that, you know? And it is like, both Damodar and I, like the experience of being like 100% kind of like fully dedicated, like all of your activities are super focused on spiritual life. It does have a certain experience to it, and it's very powerful. But it's to get us to this point that whatever we're doing, that we have to be Krishna conscious, and what in that state of consciousness, anything is pleasurable, is satisfying. So I just love that you brought that point up about how you're experiencing that in your just nothing's changed in life, but it's become a lot more, like satisfying. That's really nice.
I would like to add a precision. I mean, yes, there are activities that change. There's definitely activities that change, but it's our duty, like what we have to do, like Mike was saying, that doesn't change, because we all have our particular duties, particular responsibilities. It's not that we necessarily have to give up our responsibilities. That might be bothersome or burdensome, but we have to do them with the proper consciousness.
Yes.
Like Arjuna, his duty was to fight, so he still did that, but in the proper consciousness. We all have our responsibilities in life. We can still do them, but we change our activities. Like, for example, instead of watching the sports, you read the Gita. So there's some change. There is change of of activities, but our
It's
duty,
both
you
entertainment.
know,
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
but our duty does
Haribo?
not necessarily change, because
Haribo?
and Goshakur is also here, by the way.
Oh,
Happy to
yeah.
have him. Yes.
I saw
I
his
don't know.
silhouette there.
I don't know how to get stuff on the screen.
We
How do
saw
do
you
that?
for a few minutes there, but you disappeared again.
How do you put yourself on the screen?
Are you sitting in the
maybe the
light?
camera, something's hiding your camera, or
What?
because he's also on his so he's on your camera. Sometimes the camera kind of has, like, you know, you can see from one view or the other. I don't know if there's a way of switching your
Oh.
camera.
Camera.
But anyways,
Anyway, I
we
just
can
wanna
hear
say-
you.
Okay.
We can hear you
So-
though.
Two things I want to say. One thing is like to respond to Jade about she wants to start doing austerities a little bit. One thing is that sometimes we become frightened of austerities. We think, oh, austerity, I mean, is something very difficult to do. It may be difficult to do, but we have to remember also that as spiritual soul, a spiritual being, we have the capacity to perform great amount of austerities. It's part of our ancient awareness, ancient knowledge is awakened by Krishna consciousness. And people who develop Krishna consciousness, they can perform austerity easily. It's easy to perform austerities because it's part of the soul, quality of the soul. An example I want to give is nowadays, I don't know why it's like that, but nowadays people introduce Audi people do Krishna consciousness very slowly. But when I joined, on day one, I was chanting 16 rounds, and so did everybody else. Like as soon as we move in a temple, we started to chant 16 rounds. It was like not, without even trying hard. So I don't understand why people can only chant 1 round a day or 2 rounds a day. And we tell them, oh yeah, you just chant 1 round a day, chant 2 rounds a day. It's not easy. It's not hard to chant many rounds. We have to be a little fanatic about it, little, I don't know what it takes, but I'm just saying that the crowd of the past, they didn't wait 2 years to chant 16 rounds. They chanted 16 rounds on day one. Day one. And when I joined Krishna consciousness, on the first day, I stopped smoking. I never went back to it. First day. And it was like that for everybody else who joined. Today, I think are slow or something. I don't know what's the problem. But anyway, it's true that whatever you promise to do, you have to keep it. So if you not promise 16 rounds and you promise 1 round or 2 rounds or 4 rounds, as soon as you make the promise to Krishna, I will chant 4 rounds a day, which is described to be a vow. What a vow is, we take an oath to a certain amount of rounds, or whatever. And once we made the vow, we have to keep it. So if you cannot keep 16, you can keep. If you can't keep 4, I keep 1. That's good. Whatever it takes.
Nice. Thanks, Baru. There was one thing that crossed my mind today about the Isopanisad that I kind of like, I guess, I think I have a little bit of I don't like to hear things like there's, in each section of the Isopanisad, you hear like the darkness of ignorance, like the person's going to go to the darkness of ignorance, or the darkest place, regions of the universe, or even worse are the worshipers of the impersonal absolute. I have some like aversion to statements like this. I think it's probably because of the Christian conception of hell, where it's like this place you go and you like burn eternally for and it's so it's not, you know, it's not a pleasant pleasant conception. But I was noticing today how actually in each of these sections, the first section, it says if you act improperly, then that, you know, you go to the darkest regions of ignorance. And in the other section, if you cultivate the wrong knowledge, then that's where you end up. Or if you worship the wrong thing, that's where you end up. So Isopanisad, I was just noticing one today, that one of the themes is that it's making this distinction in terms of doing the right thing, doing the wrong thing, and what the results of all those things are. So actually, I think that's, I was thinking that's very, it's actually very helpful, because when we're in knowledge, then we can make proper decisions. And it's like, okay, so if I do that, that's what's going to happen. You know, if I stick my hand in the fire, I'm going to get burnt, as opposed to not knowing and getting burnt. So it's better to know and to avoid those things that are going to be harmful, and to know what is the proper way to go. But yeah, that was something that crossed my mind today in terms of a theme that I kind of like didn't pick up on in the Isopanisad before, how it's there in each of these sections. That's my sharing today. Sorry?
So can you summarize quickly? I didn't get the last part there. So it's a
just that
throughout the Shupanashad.
It's the Isopanisad is telling us what is the result of acting improperly, cultivating the wrong knowledge, worshiping the wrong object. So it's not just telling us the positive, but it's also giving us knowledge about what happens if you do the wrong thing, which is also helpful. It's also very helpful to know, and it's helpful, and it's an impetus, you know.
And that's interesting, because that is the last, you can say, before the prayers. You know, it's the last philosophical teaching. Well,
yeah,
he's still teaching throughout his prayers, but it's prayers, you know. So the last philosophical teaching of instruction, the last instruction that's there, and verse 14 is that he says one should know, you know, the Supreme and the thing that needs to be done, you know Krishna, know his energies, know like his pastimes, and all that. But one should also know like the material world and everything associated with that. And part of that is like the different destinations you can get by, you know, acting improperly. You know, it's interesting that your point is also like the conclusion of the instructions in one sense.
Yeah. Did you guys like that part? I don't know if you remember this, but in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada, this is just a very side detail. Srila Prabhupada said there's 3 different ways to travel to other planets. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah.
just as a fun detail. Sorry? So the one he said was, one he said was mechanical, so like spaceships. One is that you worship the particular deity of the particular planet, and you can go there by that. And the other is by practicing yoga, you can develop the mystic power to be able to travel to different planets. So just so you know, if you ever want to go to another planet, you got one of 3 options here. Mike, did you have any other specific points that came out of the Isopanisad that caught your attention?
Well, actually, it's the Brahma Jyoti, the effulgence part. That was I don't know if it was what it was for me. Was it was a lot of the Isopanisad in general. I feel like it was like a manual that explains so much metaphysics of different philosophies, right? And like when the Brahma Jyoti part especially came in, it made me think of like Buddhism and going into that state of just the blissing out, right? And kind of like being so into that peaceful mode that you can get tricked into thinking that's it. And when I heard that, it was just like the light went on for me, like, because I don't know, I can't remember if, I think it might have been the class that I missed, and Jade was talking about like her journey, how to get to Bhakti, and it was like similar for me. Like I went pretty deep into like Tibetan Buddhism and stuff, and you get some pretty cool feelings when you're into these deep states. And when I heard that in the purport, especially the way he was talking about it, it was just like, yeah, like that can get a pretty slippery slope. Like you can get addicted into getting into those states pretty fast. But I also feel like it was like very limiting. Like I never had the experience that I have, like what I was talking about with integrating this into my daily life with the Buddhism. Right. Like I felt like with the Buddhism, it was like, well, I don't even want to say with the Buddhism, because it's not really just that form of meditation. I would get into like in that moment blissed out, and then you'd go into your daily life and it would just be back to like this like chaos all the time, right? And you're like, how are you supposed to translate this like complete just nothingness to like rush hour traffic, right? Like this does not translate in some way. Like if I do this, if I go into that state right now, I'm gonna end up in the ditch, right? Like
right.
Where transcendence is relocated to just like one place, where instead of transcendence being everywhere.
Right.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it seems like it's like a bit of a cop out, or like not going the full distance, right? Like it feels like you're escaping or like giving up, kind of thing, right? Like that's
that's what it is.
And also,
that's what it is.
If you think about the word transcendence, I'm just being technical here. Transcendence means to go above all situation, you know. It's like it's above, it's above that. But you know, if you can only attain transcendence in a very particular situation, it's not being very transcendent. You know, whereas the Krishna conscious philosophy that, you know, Krishna is the source of everything, he's the transcendental Lord, and we can always connect with him, we can always have access to transcendence in every situation. It completes the real meaning of transcendence. It's available at any moment.
It's also, it's not. Oh yeah, please Ghosh Thakur, go ahead.
About the idea of who was bringing up this point about, oh yeah, the first stage, you were in that point, the different destination for acting improperly, acting poorly. Time we reported to ourselves, think, well, if I can possibly, I'll go down. If I act wisely, I'll go up. So there's a discussion between Uddhava and Krishna and Elekanto Shmagavatam about Uddhava asking Krishna, well, let's act piously. He said, what are the main items of piety? And then there was a whole list of pious land, pious people, pious scriptures, pious this, pious that. And then the opposite, you know, bad activities, bad sinful activities. And then Krishna elaborate on the pious part. And then he says, anyway, Krishna, anyway, it's not important to talk about these things. Because, yeah,
is it clear for other people, or
he said to, it's not important to talk about piety and piety. Then it goes into the next chapter after, and Invo is kind of like toasted. He said, what do you mean it's not important about piety and impiety? You talk self-piety, you talk about piety and impiety all over the Vedas. That's what we follow. You said so by piety and elevated and to commit sinful activities. Why you say that now? That not important piety and piety is a contradiction. People will become confused by the word. And Chris says, no, because we are spiritual, the path of bhakti is the main path. The path of piety will take you to heaven, to the heavenly planets. The path of sinful will take you to hell. But the Vedas describe it, the good life of piety, but we don't have a good life of piety because you take birth and after you go to the heavenly planet, they come back down. That you have to engage devotional service, not worry much about piety, and piety it'll go away by your activities of devotional service. You have to concentrate on me, not on being power sinful. You have to concentrate on me, and by chanting and devoting yourself, and the rest will take care of itself. And that's explained also when Prabhupada said, when he was being the movement on 26th Avenue, he was saying, let's forget about the rule and regulation. First of all, let them become absorbed in Krishna. The rules and regulations will follow after. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness movement, everybody was like drug addicted. Prabhupada didn't introduce the 4 regs. He didn't talk about them. But for 6 months, he became attached to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada produced 4 regs. They have an attachment to a devotee that took some of them upwards, and took some others out the door. So I just want to say that because in the big Krishna consciousness, we cannot always follow 4 regs properly or wisely all the time with attachment, etc., etc. But that should not stop our devotion to Krishna. Devotional service, if increases, the bad acts and all these things will disappear actually.
Nice. Thanks, Coach.
There was one girl in the beginning of our movement. She asked Prabhupada a question at the end of the class, and she was, Prabhupada, I have some problems, some defects, and I'm kind of like disappointed, you know. I said, no, don't concentrate on weaknesses. Just concentrate on devotion. Because you have devotional service, it will grow. It will grow, and grow.
Right. And
one day, the fruit of love will fall into your lap. You'll be able to enjoy that fruit like a flower. It starts with like a bud, then a twig, and then a flower and a big flower. And then there's aroma, and the aroma is appreciated by the gardener. So the devotional service like that, it's slowly, then it grows and grows and grows, and it will carry us on sinful and past activities.
Thanks, Gosh. Did you, was that breaking up for you guys, Mike? And did you, Gosh, I'll just try to, I think I caught most of it. I'll just try to reiterate, because it was breaking up. You were breaking up quite a bit as you were speaking.
Yeah, it was also breaking up for me.
Yeah, so as far as I understood, Ghosh Thakur was making this point because I was mentioning about acting properly and improperly. So Krishna, he describes to Uddhava, there's a conversation in the Srimad Bhagavatam between the two of them. And so acting properly is known as piety, and acting improperly is known as impiety. And Krishna says this is not the real thing. Even though Uddhava says this, you talk about this all over the Vedas, and he says, so piety will bring you to heaven in the heavenly planets, and impiety will bring you to hell. But actually, the real thing is to become attached to me, to develop Krishna consciousness. This is the point of the Isopanisad also in those first 3 mantras. To do proper action means to do it means to do it in the proper consciousness, which means to do it in Krishna consciousness. If that's not there, it's not proper. And so Ghosh was just describing how This point is actually brought out, he brought it out in a few examples, which were actually quite nice and poetic. It was hard to hear, a little hard to hear them, but there's a few very nice poetic examples. But the point is that we may not always be able to follow everything well, perfectly. We may even do things that are not very good, but we have to always focus on the developing the devotion. We have to keep focusing on Krishna in that devotional aspect, because that in itself is more powerful. It will eventually, if we focus on that, then the other things will go away. To focus on the devotional aspect, to focus on developing Krishna consciousness, if we focus on that, then the other things will they will gradually disappear, because as Damodar was pointing out earlier, the heart becomes purified. And so the desire and the tendency to do those things will go away. So the most important aspect of it is to focus on the development of Krishna consciousness. And naturally, the other things will follow. And Ghosh he gave a few examples where, you gave one example where Prabhupada was making this point, how this is the most important element to focus on, is this focusing on Krishna. I hope I represented that somewhat okay, Ghosh. It was really breaking up quite a bit, and it was hard to hear.
Okay, no, that's good enough. Thank you.
I did my best.
Hearing it from you, I learned more. My own statement, I hear it in your mouth becomes more potent. I don't understand why.
It's like hearing it it's like hearing it through the parampara. I'm hearing it from Ghosh Thakur, who now repeating it to Brihat, and I'm hearing it from Brihat. It's like, gets more sweet.
Each other.
It's 8:06, Damodar.
Yes. So time.
Was there anything else, Mike or Jay, that you wanted to bring out before we depart? Before we
No, other than
Mike
just
or Jay?
Everything. I really appreciate this whole class. It's been fantastic. I both classes have been so great, but this text specifically, it's like what Damodar was saying earlier. It's so concise, right? Like the Gita, it's so deep, but because this one's so short, it's just like jam packed. It's just like every class is just punching you with the gut, right? Like with more and more information. It's just it's phenomenal. It's I really appreciate.
Well, thank you.
How thankful I am.
Thank you for taking the time to we thank you, all the previous teachers of Bhakti. Thank you for taking some time to hear the Isopanisad. It's this is the most glorious activity that we can do, is to hear the teachings of the previous teachers of Bhakti.
My mentor always says there's only one thing better than having something good, and that's sharing it with others.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we feel it. We feel it also. Like it's this is the thing, is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it describes, because the Srimad Bhagavatam is a conversation between two great personalities, and the speaker, he describes how both by speaking about Krishna and by hearing about Krishna, both are benefited, both are enlivened. It's mutually beneficial. You get as much benefit, we get as much benefit by being on both sides. And the thing is, because you're on that side now, at some point you'll be on this side. You'll be explaining Krishna consciousness to somebody else at some point in time.
I hope so.
Awesome. This is a wonderful way to conclude. So thank you so much for all your participation, and looking forward to seeing you next week. For the
Thank
beginning of Nectar Devotion, we have Bala Krishna give the class, if I'm not mistaken. Hi, Krishna.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.